Many of us have been trained as Christians and churchgoers to react in a particular way to certain phrases. And for many of us, myself inclusive, when you hear the phrase Holy Ghost fire, many of us think about destructive expressions of God. Something similar to what we have in Psalm 97 and verse 3. Psalm 97 verse 3 says, fire goes before God and consumes all his enemies. Many of us have been trained to hear that phrase, Holy Ghost fire, and interpret it in the strict sense of destructive activity. Not that we will be destroyed, but that enemies will be destroyed. The enemies of God, the enemies of our lives will be destroyed. Some of us also see the phrase as an explanation to the reverential presence of God. In Hebrews chapter 12 and verse 29, it says, for our God is a consuming fire. In verse 28, it says we should receive grace so that we can serve God with all reverence and in a way that it will be accepted, because our God is a consuming fire. And that's a very legitimate description or representation of the concept of fire. It speaks, in a sense, about the destructive power of God towards his enemies. However, you see, as Christians, we shouldn't just be thinking about enemies all the time. If all you think about in church, think about as a Christian, our enemies, you will not really grow in the faith. If you are too enemy conscious, so that every concept is narrowed down to your enemy. When we talk about power, you are thinking about power over your enemy. When we talk about fire, you are thinking about Holy Ghost fire against your enemy. That's not really a healthy way to live as a Christian. It's best to understand the subject in a holistic manner, so that it won't just be narrowed down to a reality that is not all there is on that subject. The point I'm making here is this. Even in the natural, fire is not always destructive. I mean, many of you will not have come to church today if you do not have fire to boil water. You cannot bathe in the cold. I didn't grow up like that. Bathing with cold water was something of pride for me until I married. And my wife began to spoil me. That, no, you can boil water and bathe with it. Usually, even if it is freezing degrees, I just go to the bedroom and bathe like a boy. You know how boys bathe? You just wash your stomach and wash your leg and we're out. But the point is that fire is not, even in the natural, just about negative, destructive tendencies. For instance, fire warms. In ancient days where there were no heaters, if it was cold, they lit a firewood, and they came around it and just warmed around the fire. It was a way to protect yourself against the cold. So fire warms. We also know that fire cooks. Most of your dishes have to go through fire for them to turn out well. If you are eating cornflakes, or what other one does not need fire? Golden Moon, you may not need fire. But if you want to eat real food, you will have to put food through fire. All the tasty meals we enjoy has to go through fire. So fire warms, fire cooks. In fact, one of the things that kickstarted the automobile industry was the technology of fire. That's why we used to have coal trains. Trains that were powered by ignition, powered by fire. All right, that has, of course, evolved to something better. But the point I'm making here is that fire can be constructive. It can be seen as a positive thing. Fire cooks, fire warms, fire forms.